Welcome once again to Sid Caudle and the Week in Focus. And let's jump the Atlantic, and we've got enough problems at home with the UK, Sid. But Trump seems to have shut his mouth off. He doesn't like, the contributors to NATO because they're not contributing. And he doesn't mind if Russia comes in. Does he mean it? Is he bluffing? Is this the sort of president we want back?
Now, what Trump is concerned about is the fact that the US is paying 3.46% of its gross national product to defence. And the rule is for NATO that all NATO countries must pay a minimum of 2%. And we pay actually 2.07%, so we pay just above the minimum. But there's quite a lot of countries, including Germany and Canada and France and Norway and all these countries, that are actually far more threatened by Russia and are far more likely to need the help of NATO, that are paying significantly less than the 2%. And what Trump is saying is, come on, you either pay up or, NATO won't work. NATO doesn't work if the United States is expected to fund it, because we need it. We don't need NATO. The United States doesn't need NATO. You do. And if you want us to support you in defence, then we've got to have equal contributions. You've got to be paid the same as us, not far less than, not half of what we pay. And he's saying, if at the end of the day, if you're not paying, as far as I'm concerned, we're not supporting you if you're attacked by Russia. End of story. That's what he's basically said. I mean, the fact that he's also said, he said that the countries have said to him, but if Russia attacked us, you'd still support us. And he said, no, I wouldn't. If you're not paying and Russia attacks you, then you're on your own.
And the hard word, that's what we've been missing, isn't it, under Joe Biden's presidency? No hard words.
Well, that's it. Well, Trump doesn't mess around. And of course, he's right, frankly. The only thing he's not right on is the fact that he said, and if Russia attacked you, I'd encourage them, I'd egg them on, which is just ridiculous. I mean, I don't think he really meant that at all, but he was just being over the top. But the principle of what he's saying is right. Every country should pay the minimum that's agreed. And what the countries that aren't paying the minimum, they're the ones that are at fault, not America.
Yeah, and let's come over the Atlantic before going back over the Atlantic again and look at the paucity of our own forces. I mean, they're in and out of Portsmouth there with the new aircraft carriers costing billions. They've had one problem with the prop shaft on one, same as occurred on the other one. We've got no aircraft to put on the deck. Sid, it's an absolute embarrassment. We spent all this money, we can't even send it out to the Red Sea.
Yeah, I think, frankly, we got our priorities wrong, because we're spending billions of pounds on new nuclear weapons. I mean, I'm not saying we should get rid of our nuclear weapons, because I think they are a deterrent. But the idea that we need to be spending billions on new nuclear weapons to have more advanced weapons than we've got at the moment, to me, is just nonsense, because what we really need is missile shield, it's missile defense. And we've got these new laser weapons. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what we need. And like you say, we need basic defense. We need to have aircraft carriers, and we need aeroplanes on the aircraft carriers. We need aeroplanes that work. We need an effective defense force. And the days of needing massive nuclear weapons, I'm afraid, are over. I mean, Russia spent all these billions and billions on nuclear weapons, and they talk about using them, but they never actually use them. And thank goodness they've never actually used them, because they're horrific weapons. And we should keep our nuclear weapons as a deterrent, but we shouldn't be updating them.
Well, China's come on board literally now, and they're about to overtake even the United States Navy. They're specializing in underwater warfare. They've got the latest submarines. They could wipe out everybody. They've snuck up on us, haven't they?
Yes, well, they've been doing stuff in the South China Sea for a long time, and basically anyone that comes near what they're doing, they basically frighten them off. Yes, I mean, China is very, very dangerous. And, you know, this is where there's a problem, you see, if people aren't contributing effectively to NATO, because NATO should be working to make sure that they've got updated weapons that are able to deal with China, not just newer and newer nuclear weapons. We need to have an effective navy. Of course, we need an effective navy, but you know, we need to be part of an effective international navy that's able to combat Russia and China. That's the reality.
Yeah, it's a complicated problem because a lot of people say, oh, the aircraft carriers are doing nothing. But one has to remember that an aircraft carrier, whoever owns it, is a sitting duck. It's got to be surrounded by lots of other vessels to defend it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a floating island, and we ain't got the number of vessels, Sid. As you say, we've got it wrong. And it's not just the Navy, it's another NHS.
Yeah. So I mean, it's we've got to get our priorities right. We've got to think about what we're doing, and you know, not just react to what you know the Defence Department says. We got to think strategically, and we've got to work with other countries that are our friends to you know thinking strategically.
We promised to go back again over the Atlantic, and this is the real scare story, of course. Hillary's back. She's come out with some words of wisdom. She realizes that Biden's not very well. Well, that's no big deal, is it? Apparently, 86% of a recent poll of everybody, including Democrats and Republicans, say Biden should go. He's too old. Hillary's been clever. Is she having another punt? One wonders. She's come back and said, well, hang on, Trump's only 3 years younger, and compared Trump with Biden. Bit of apples and compared with pears there.
Well, this is what the media are trying to do because you see, it's what they're doing all the time. Frankly, I mean, every time Biden's in trouble, they say, "Oh yeah, but Trump is worse. Trump is just as bad, or whatever," which is complete nonsense. I mean, they introduced the 25th Amendment for Trump, which is, if people don't know, that's the amendment that says if the president isn't fit to hold office, he can be removed. And they put him through a whole load of tests, and he passed them all with flying colours. They won't put Biden through the same tests because they know that he'd fail all the tests. I mean, but what's actually happened in this last week is that we've had this report from the special counsel, Robert Hur, which was investigating Biden's use of secret documents or retention of secret documents, classified documents in his garage and various other places, including the Chinese Penn Center. They were in a lot of different places, these classified documents. And he investigated and he came back and basically said, yeah, Biden did it all intentionally. It was very bad what he was doing. He knew perfectly well what he was doing, but there's not much point in prosecuting him because he's an elderly man, and a jury would just say, well, he just forgot, he didn't realize what he was doing. And he's likely to win over the jury with that sort of argument. But he said the fact is he couldn't even remember when he was vice president. He couldn't remember the year that his son died. I mean, it's he's just, you know, he's not well enough basically to take to court. It's just like it's like, oh, but he's well enough to be president, is he?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's the new guy from California. People got their eyes on to replace him. People are even saying, "Oh, get Kamala in for the last few months." Frying pan and fire spring to mind there.
Well, this is where the Democrats have got a problem because the natural result, if Biden stands down, is that his vice president takes over. But Kamala Harris is even more unpopular than Joe Biden. Bringing somebody in completely out of the cold is quite difficult, but the only way they can do it is if Biden himself voluntarily stands down. I mean, if Biden himself says, yeah, I've realized that I'm sorry that I really can't face a second term. I'm not fit and well. You know, it's you'll have to select somebody else. Then all of a sudden it's over to the Democrat National Committee. Kamala Harris doesn't come into it under those circumstances, they can basically choose who they want. And Michelle Obama's putting her hat into the ring by the sounds of things, because she's actually talking about fundraising. But if she's president, obviously it'll be Barack Obama that's running the show, which he's probably running the show now, frankly. He's probably telling Joe Biden what to do. But certainly if Michelle Obama was the president, Barack will be telling her what to do all the time. But he's in a sense, he'd be in the White House because he'd be the husband of the president. But that's the plan, I think.
Well, the other theory, of course, is that actually it's Mrs. Biden that's running the show. Barack has got too much on his plate with the green issues. That's his pet thing. Everybody seems to go there, don't they? Perhaps it's an easier life. But Mrs. Biden is actually attending more and more meetings of import, and she's the puppet master.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right. I mean, people don't know for certain, but I think in terms of strategy, I think Barack Obama is behind the strategy of this presidency, in my opinion. But day to day, Jill Biden may well be carrying out and implementing that strategy, and making decisions on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that is quite likely.
Yeah, let's stick or go back rather to the Army, Navy, Air Force in the United Kingdom. What a lot of woke mess we are in. Now, we've known, Sid, and discussed this on many occasions. Woke has got into our institutions, whether they be governmental institutions, and even the big companies are involved in woke. Apparently, this latest trio of diversity, inclusivity, etc., is on the wane in America. They've realised the error of their ways. But certainly the British Army, Navy and Air Force haven't. In fact, it's worse there, if that's possible, than anywhere else. Now, of course, most people have seen the famous advert of recruitment for the Army. There they are in the hills, making headway over bogs and all sorts of difficult terrain. And before they attack the enemy, a Muslim is seen to go on his knees, facing east and praying Allah for help. Now, I can't imagine any other country putting an advert out like that, especially for recruitment. It's madness where we are.
Yes, and frankly, it's insidious what's gone on. But in fact, I believe it's Marxist infiltration that's really going on behind the scenes. But I think increasingly people are becoming aware of it. And it's quite interesting that we got European Parliament elections coming up, and are saying it's highly likely that the right wing could actually take over the European Parliament, because there's so many right-wing parties that are performing well above expectations in lots of different countries. But of course, the European Parliament elections, voters don't really care about, because the European Parliament, as we said before, doesn't make the decisions. The decisions are taken by the European Commission. So the voters don't really care who wins, and they don't mind putting their vote for a party which they really support, which they know in their own country probably is unlikely to win. But in the European Parliament, they think, well, we'll put them there. I mean, in the past, Britain, we put the Brexit Party in the European Parliament overwhelmingly. I mean, they got a massive majority in the European parliamentary elections because people weren't really bothered. I mean, the Conservatives were almost wiped out in the last European parliamentary elections that we voted in, which is quite interesting. So there's certainly a fight back underway across the world against all this, what I call Marxism and wokeism, New Age, whatever you want to call it, because it is nasty and it's wrong. Yeah, and while we're talking about this, I mean, I should say that it reminds me of what we were talking about last week, which was the way the police attacked Harmony London on Oxford Street. And I put a complaint in, which I've yet got a reply to, because they have a Muslim anti-Islamic advisor, they have LGBT advisors, but they don't have any Christian advisors. They have nobody in the police that's actually advising them to be fair to Christians, and they're not being fair to Christians. They're not being even across the board, and the police should be.
Indeed, they should. That brings us to the Reverend Matthew Firth. Now, up in the northeast there, he comes across, believe it or not, like many of the cloth, Islamists going there and saying, sign this note saying I've become a Christian. Now, at the start, maybe he was taken in a little bit. One doesn't know. They can be very persuasive, these people, but he soon sussed them out. And he's become a real whistleblower. You can't just become Muslim, convert from Muslim to Christianity just to find your way in the United Kingdom. And it gets sinister, Sid, because what happens here is once they've been signed in as being Christians, the lawyers who are at the back of all this actually are in contact with the vicars giving these notes out. Yes, he's professed Christianity. And the lawyers are saying, we really would need to go a bit further and say, he's part of the flock. He's preaching evangelical messages. He's doing this, that, and the other. And of course, Matthew Firth says, no, I can't say that because it's not true. But this is the moral paucity of the lawyers involved in this false game of getting these people legal. Now, we all know the mandate, well, you've got to act for the good and the bad as a lawyer. But in these instances, when it's clearly cheating, then I'm sorry, I hold the lawyers to account. They're getting £6,000, £7,000, £10,000 a case. They know that these people are false, and yet they're allowed to continue. So who's to blame? Is it the Law Society? Is it the individual lawyer? Or are we completely morally bankrupt in UK?
No, it's the fault is entirely, in my view, entirely with the Church of England, because I've been to court myself with the Home Office on behalf of some people who did genuinely convert from Islam to Christianity. And I know they converted genuinely because we worked with them from a food bank, and they were coming to church, and they were actually coming to church for a period of 6 months before they gave their lives and became Christians. And we were working with them for a period of about 2 years. And by the way, I mean, it's one of those two people just recently got married, and they got married to a lovely Christian man. I mean, so there's no question that we were being hoodwinked. But I went to the immigration meeting with them, and the Home Office were extremely concerned about the fact that there were loads of fake conversions. And, is this, and the judge was asking, is this a fake conversion? And it's like, well, we've got the pastor here that, that's bearing witness for them. We don't normally have a pastor that will come with the people in support of them. So he said, this one's unlikely to be fake. So, and what I'm talking about now is about 4 or 5 years ago. So the Home Office is well aware of the possibility of fake conversions. But obviously, if a vicar says, oh no, this person is a member of my church and I've baptized them and they're fully supportive, and if they say things like you're saying, that they do evangelistic work with us in the streets, then obviously the Home Office is in a very difficult situation then to turn around and say, well, I don't believe you. I don't believe the conversion is genuine. Because what the vicar is saying, almost forces them to accept the conversion as genuine. And if what the Church of England is saying is completely untrue, then, and they're only saying it just to simply, to inverted commas, help the immigrant, then quite honestly, what they're doing is completely and utterly wrong. And a bishop, when he was trying to defend this, actually said, oh, we're not involved in any decisions. It's the Home Office that makes the decisions. Of course not. But if you're forcing the Home Office to make decisions in a particular direction because you're actually saying, yes, this is a genuine conversion when it isn't, then what you're doing is wrong and immoral.
Sid, can I read you the new 10 Commandments as applicable to back to the army? And it reflects what we are in society. By the 10 Commandments, these have been put in place by companies, especially the services, on the following basis of obviously diversity, equity, inclusivity. Number one, quotas are very, very important. Never mind realities and positions that choose the best person for that particular job. Quotas are the thing. Number two, white is bad. Oh, if you compare white, it's more difficult to be white these days than any other ethnicity, it seems. Number three, specifically for the army this month, you can't be called a rifleman anymore. And there are many other designations. Well, rifle person, rifle woman, goodness knows. Next one. No more, and this really hurts me, and I would think many, many other Christians. No more remembrance services, they're too Christian. And even Grant Shapps, as a Jew, has gone berserk about that one. And they want it to become multi-faith or no faith, preferably. Wonder where that's coming from, Mr. Marx. The next one is the usual LBGT infiltration. Let's get the LGBT thing right, by the way. It's longer than this, but it's at least LGBTQQIRAR plus. And if you want to know what one of them, QI, means as a sort of designation, questioning intersex. Now, goodness only knows what that means or what it does. Can I say next? Diversity training is for everyone. And you will be given thoughts of Chairman Mao if you dare infringe anything that is not populist on that day regarding LGBT. Then you've got the perfect phrase of unconscious bias. Don't you realize, you white people, you're privileged? Oh, you probably don't realize, so we'll call it unconscious bias. It's a nonsense. And so the list goes on, actually. It's more than 10. I'll stick to 10. Behind this, of course, now in our armed services, 1 in every 100 soldiers, especially appointed diversity officers to make sure their platoon is behaving itself. Now, Sid, everything's gone. We used to have the best forces in the world. We ain't now.
Yeah, well, you see, what all this is fundamentally is an attack on Christianity. I mean, you saw it obviously most blatantly with saying we're no longer going to hold Remembrance Sunday services because these are Christian and we don't want Christian services. And it's quite interesting. You see, in the BBC, they tried to get rid of songs of praise. You know, we've got to get rid of all Christianity from the BBC. But there was such an outcry that they retained it. But instead of retaining it at a sensible time, they kept making it earlier and earlier, so that you know, to try and get fewer people to watch it. And then they want to say, "Oh, nobody's watching this, so we'll get rid of it." But I mean, the fact is, a lot of people do watch it, and so they haven't been able to get rid of it. But you know, it's just like, this is the move to get rid of all evidence of Christianity in society, and everything else which they're doing is blatantly anti-Christian. You know, Christianity is in the beginning God made man and woman, and a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That's what Jesus said, and that is fundamental Christianity. And by the way, while I'm talking like this, you also got to remember that God said, "I was a witness to the covenant you made between your wife the wife of your youth, for I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. You know, it's like marriage is very, very important in Judaism and in Christianity, and faithfulness in marriage. And all of this is trying to undermine the fundamental importance of Christian marriage, and trying to make out that any sexual relationship is acceptable and we should never stop any sexual relationship. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what, you know, let people choose to do exactly what they want. That's what diversity is. Diversity is a blatant attack on Christianity, and we've got to be honest about what we're talking about, and fight for what are true Christian values, and that's what we stand for.
The mess carries on with frustrated bosses. These are some of the good guys. There are some left. There's 900,000 jobs, nearly 1 million jobs available, desperate. And the only way we're going to get them, they say, is get people from abroad. And everybody stands back and says, probably rightly, have we not got enough? Well, apparently not, because the people that are coming in from abroad are well below average wage earners, even though they promised us the elite will be coming from abroad. Now the bosses have realised what a nonsense that is, but they really want the elite, and their answer is to give them short-term visas. They will help us out the immediate doo-doo. Will they?
Well, we shouldn't be inviting the elite from other parts of the world, because those countries need their best brains. You know, we shouldn't be trying to get the best brains from Africa to come to the UK, and, you know, and work in our scientific establishments. You know, the best brains in Africa should be staying in Africa and helping the redevelopment of their countries. I mean, you know, we believe in aid, overseas aid, but overseas aid shouldn't be all about, you know, trying to contribute money to these countries. By the way, often with overseas aid, we're actually putting strings attached to it, which include diversity and inclusion, and we're using overseas aid to promote these sort of things. But one of the best things we could do with overseas aid is encouraging people to stay in their own countries and contribute to their own countries.
Yeah, good point. The juggernaut moves on. If we're looking at immigration, the figures are alarming. It is failing. People realise that nobody can get doctor's appointments, the right schools they want to go to. They can't even buy a house. And everybody stands up and says, oh, well, don't forget about the pandemic. Well, again, Sid, they're missing the elephant in the room. Every country's had the pandemic. We've not got it right. And it's not right to blame excessive immigration as being the whole culprit. There are many culprits, but nobody dares mention it. This is the biggest culprit, uncontrolled immigration. There's too many people in the United Kingdom. And if you don't believe it, drive on any motorway as a simple test. But there we are. Oh, that's where we are. That's where we've been put by our Marxist governments, inverted commas, or should it be reality, not inverted commas? And if we're going down that sector, Rwanda springs up to mind. Now, how that is going to be made to work, nobody knows. The best scenario would be 500 people that they will return through this means at an enormous cost of over 100 grand a person. It is crackers, and yet there is an answer. It's come from an illegal immigrant who apparently has set himself up on the beach under a boat, upturned boat, because that's the only accommodation he can find. And he's stood up and said, forget the 4-star and 5-star hotels there. They're being withdrawn. I'm trying to get a job in Britain. I'm a plasterer. I can be very useful. And I can't. And he's standing up there and saying, go back to Calais. You're wasting your time. I tell you what, that's done far more good and been far more effective than Rishi saying, oh, the Rwanda thing will put people off. We want more illegal immigrants telling us the truth. Don't come to Britain.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, you're quite right. The whole Rwanda idea is to basically tell people, look, there's no point in coming to Britain, because if you do, they'll just put you on a plane and take you back to Africa, and you'll just end up in a different country in Africa. That's the idea behind it. But you know, it's not working, because it's not working because of all the human rights lawyers that basically say, you know, you can't do it. But it's not the best scheme anyway. I mean, we've talked about this before many times, and there's lots of other ways of deterring people from coming over here. Most importantly, is to deal with all the human traffickers, find out who they are, prosecute them, and stop them getting people to pay them to bring immigrants over to the UK. These aren't, as must be stated very clearly, the most needy people in the world. The most needy people in the world cannot afford to get into boats and come over to the UK. That's the reality of it. And our priority should be to help the most needy people in the world.
Let's go to Ireland. They don't like us in Ireland. In fact, they're being criticised by most of the other countries of Europe as being mean. Since Varadkar got back in power there, they've gone mean with Northern Ireland. They've gone mean in various other ways, because Sinn Féin is really influencing them big time. They want the island of Ireland for themselves. They will do anything to get it. How the Northern Irish put up with the rest of Britain, the way the rest of Britain's treated Northern Ireland, these are our friends. Can't say the same often about the Scottish nationalists or the Welsh nationalists. But the Northern Irish, we should be backing up, and we don't, Sid. What's going on?
Well, one thing that's going on that people obviously have got to appreciate is the fact that Sinn Féin has been very successful in standing elections in Southern Ireland. So they are now a major political force in Southern Ireland. They're now the largest party in Northern Ireland, and that's not because they've gained a lot of votes. It's basically because the unionist side has been increasingly fractured. You've got the Democratic Unionist Party, you've got the Ulster Unionist Party, and you've got the traditional Unionist Voice that's come as a new party, which is basically to the right of the DUP. And because the unionist vote is fractured to the extent that it is, it basically means that the Sinn Féin, with this holding the same number of votes, has now become the largest party. So the unionist side have got to get their act together. The Alliance Party have also gained votes, which is also a consideration. But you see, the Alliance Party is basically like the Liberal Democrats, and they represent totally the woke side of politics. But obviously, so does Sinn Féin. I mean, Sinn Féin was supposedly a Catholic party, but they've got no interest whatsoever in Roman Catholicism. They've got no interest whatsoever in Christianity. I mean, they're a totally liberal, woke organisation, the Sinn Féin are. So, but, you know, at the end of the day, if people are voting for these parties, they've got a right to, as the largest party, to take their place. And obviously, that's a major problem for Northern Ireland as a whole. The only good side is the fact that when they ask the people of Northern Ireland, do you want to leave the UK and become part of, Southern Ireland? 55% of the people say no, we don't. We want to stay attached to the UK. So even though the unionist side is completely fractured, they still represent the majority of people in Northern Ireland.
Is it just a matter of time, Sid? 50 years?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, things flow one way and flow another way. I mean, I think what the DUP have done over the last few years, I have to say, has been extremely important, because we left the EU with this crazy deal, which had with it the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was just terrible for Northern Ireland. And the DUP have been very strong and very firm and said it's not acceptable, we're not working with it. And the only thing they could do was basically say, we're not going to support devolved government, as long as this protocol is in place. They took that position very strongly. They got it renegotiated with the Windsor framework. That wasn't acceptable either, and they've now got further renegotiation. Initially, they were told there can be no renegotiation. You take it or leave it. There's either you accept the Northern Ireland Protocol, or else you're going to have to be part of United Ireland. And they basically said, no, we're not accepting either. We're not accepting the protocol, and we're not going to be part of United Ireland. And if that's your position, as I say, they just said, we're not joining Stormont. And they've done well. They've done very well. They haven't got everything that they wanted, but they have renegotiated it and got major concessions. So well done, the DUP.
Let's give you some interesting statistics relating to television news. Now, bar the nearest thing to getting exact figures of who's watching an advert, who's watching a program, etc. Barbies, where 3,000 viewers throughout the United Kingdom are given machines. And if you're sat on your couch, potato, you press it when an advert comes on, and the program you're watching, and it's fairly accurate, actually. Blooming expensive. Used to be about 30 grand a year that we had to pay when I was running a Sky channel. We thought, my goodness me, that's an awful lot of money. It is. It's darn sight more now. But it's the most exact way of getting to know who watches. Now, that takes us to GB News, because they've done everything, including Ofcom, to get rid of them. This is the power of the Marxists in the United Kingdom. Then came another upstart, Talk TV, which was from Talk Radio, Rupert Murdoch's pet channel. And he thought, right, we'll get the big boys in here. Piers Morgan heading it up. Big name, mega over at the other side of the pond, mega in Britain. But he's fallen on his face. The viewing figures are appalling. And Piers has done a runner. And he's decided to go on YouTube. A bit like Tucker and Twitter, I suppose. Because this is the new media, the way forward to get a really big audience. Often for a one-off specific venture. But you're talking millions watching these people. Certainly when they get to the Tucker status and Piers Morgan status. But let me give you the figures. On a Monday in January, 11,000 people were watching Talk TV, even for Piers Morgan's programme. That's tiny, tiny. The average audience for GB News, interestingly enough, is 58,000 on a Monday. They've really taken hold, and that's practically the same as Sky. They've caught up with Sky. And the only one to beat them, and only just by 10,000, is BBC News. So haven't they done well despite the outrageous fortunes? The other interesting thing is if you switch from GB News and finish up watching second-class adverts because the main woke advertisers have boycotted them, switch it to Talk TV, you get the same adverts. They've been boycotted as well. This is a disgrace. But isn't it also interesting that Rishi has chosen his first big debate of the parliamentary election season, which is now nearly 12 months. We're going like America. He's chosen GB News. Made a fair fist at it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, I must admit, I thought before when Rishi Sunak did a news conference and he was calling out all the British news organisations, and he didn't call out GB News, and I thought, wow, that's interesting that he's basically avoided them. But then he's done this interview on GB News, although it's very interesting that as part of that interview was a guy who stood up and really laid into Rishi Sunak over the vaccine, because he himself, the guy himself, had been severely damaged by taking the vaccine. And that I think proved to be the highlight of the Rishi Sunak interview. But I don't expect that has done GB News any harm, because the fact that guy did what he did probably made the whole interview, brought the whole interview onto a lot of people's consciousness in a way that it probably wouldn't have been if he hadn't. So I think it's interesting. But yeah, certainly GB News are getting a lot of people watching them, and well done. I mean, I watch GB News quite a bit myself. I get frustrated. I mean, I wish they'd allow me to go onto GB News. I'm sure I could do a good job, but they won't. And what really annoys me is when they're discussing Christian issues, and they've done it several times now, and they haven't had any Christian on the panel. In fact, they're actually talking about things to do with the Church of England, and they've had two people come on and say, "Oh, we're atheists," and it's just ridiculous discussing Christian issues with atheists on GB News, and that they should have the guts to bring a Christian on as part of the discussion.
More stats, Sid. We alluded to this earlier on in our chat. Actually, David Miles, who used to be chief exec of the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility, he's actually said now, and agreed with the rest of the world, in the UK at least anyway, cut the benefits, curb immigration. That's the chief problem. Oh, it's the hope for us. 10 million people in the United Kingdom are not working, he says. Yeah, 2.8 million because of health problems. Half of those you can blame the inefficient NHS for. But what happens to the rest of them? Where are they all? That's probably why, as discussed earlier, 900,000 jobs, and decent jobs that our employers want to bring people in. Now, it's too easy in Britain. We come across this all the time in Spain and Portugal and France. You can sit at home as a couch potato and do absolutely nothing. The benefits are too high. So he sees that, and he wants to curb immigration and curb benefits and get people out of universities where they should not darken the doors in the first place. They should be on decent apprenticeships. Sounds simple, Sid. Nothing happens. Why?
Well, you've got to delve into these figures. I mean, some of these people that are unemployed and unproductive are actually mothers at home looking after the children. And, from a Christian perspective, that is, we don't want, mothers giving birth to children and then putting children into childcare and going straight back to work. We actually want them at home looking after their children. So it's not all wrong. But there aren't masses of people that want jobs that can't find them at the moment, which is basically a good thing. But if there are people, I mean, I guess there are some, but if there are people that have never worked, then before they get benefits, they should be forced to do some sort of community service. And community service could be working in the fields at harvest time, when we need labour. It could be community service, could be working in a care home when sometimes it's difficult to find people to work in those care homes. But people should be forced to do community service for their benefits if they've never had a proper paid employed job.
Don't stand a chance getting that through, however right it might be. There's no way you could get through with our modern societies and constraints and laws and goodness knows what, and trade unions. You'd never get it through, Sid.
Well, if we were in power, we'd pass a law and it would happen. Basically, I mean, we have community service now as part of a community service orders for people that the courts can give people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with forcing people to do community service. There's nothing wrong with forcing people to do community service as a condition of benefits if they've already been unemployed for a long period of time. I mean, I'm not talking about everyone having to do community service as a condition of benefits. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is if people have been long-term unemployed, and I'm talking about over 2 years, and they can get into a position where they don't want to work anymore. They're getting the benefits, they're happy just getting the benefits, they don't want to work. those sort of people, I'm afraid, we have to force them to do work, and force them to do work is basically saying you have to do community service as a condition of your benefits. Then when they start doing work, they can say, well, maybe I can do better work than this, and we can get them back properly into the job process.
Run out of time, Sid, but we'll squeeze this one in as the most important item on the agenda for today. There is a great difference between rugby players and rugby crowds and football players and football crowds. And you'd think, oh, rugby's a darn sight rougher. Surely we get rougher crowds. No, quite the opposite. Why am I saying this? Because we want to go down the rugby, or some of us, blue carding in football. They're going to try and experiment it perhaps next year with the FA Cup, perhaps with the ladies' matches, and see if it works. 10 minutes in the sin bin, blue card. You get a blue card because you question authorities. Call the referee a blankety blank. And if you get 2 blue cards in one match, that's equivalent to a red. Some people say, oh, well, that's a bit better than another yellow card and getting people off the field for trivia. Do you approve or not?
Yes, I do, because I think, there needs to be something in between a yellow card, which is basically a warning, and a red card, which is basically you're out the game entirely. And if someone's given a red card at the beginning of a game, it can really affect the result enormously. And it's interesting how things have changed, actually, because at one time when people were given a red card and a team was down to 10 men, they seemed to actually often improve and do better with 10 men than with 11. But because football has become more technical, it seems now that you lose a player and you're far more likely to lose the game. So, yeah, I think there's a strong argument for saying we need something in between. And something in between would be 10 minutes off the field and then you can come back on again. And it's very difficult sometimes for referees, I think, to look at an incident and to decide, is this so bad that the player needs to be sent off, or can this just be a warning? And if there's something in between, I think it would help them enormously.
Most of the Premiership managers are against it for various reasons. One of the things is, what about the goalkeeper? What are you going to do with him if you send the goalkeeper off? Are you going to get one of the other lads to come and take his jersey, or are you going to get somebody on off the bench? Well, that wouldn't make sense, really. But there are, the referee has enough to do with timing people on and off the field as it is at the moment. That's the other objection. Personally speaking, I'd get rid of VAR before bringing this on and give this a trial, as they've done with VAR. I think at the end of the day, it may well be the better solution.
No, I agree totally. I mean, but most teams have a reserve goalkeeper among their reserves. So if the goalkeeper is sent off for whatever reason, or has 10 minutes in the sin bin for whatever reason, then you can bring on the reserve goalkeeper who plays for 10 minutes, and then when obviously you'd have to take another player off, but when the original goalkeeper comes back on, the reserve keeper goes off. But I mean, a team could have the option, I guess, of keeping the reserve goalkeeper if he actually plays better than the original goalkeeper. But and then the player that came off for the reserve goalkeeper, he could obviously come, or she could come back on.
There is another solution, of course. Pay them less. They wouldn't be spoiled brats, and they would be behaving a lot better than they do at the moment.
Well, it is a case that when players have got a yellow card, they play differently than and sometimes players know that they take a yellow card for the sake of the team, because they realise that if they allow that player to go through, that there's a very good chance that they'll score, so they have to stop them, and they knew that they're going to get a yellow card for it. It's I think that sort of thing is wrong. And I guess if a referee had an option of giving a blue card and the player was off the pitch for 10 minutes, I think players would think a lot more carefully about taking a yellow card for the sake of the team, as it were.
Yeah, how life and how the game of football is a mirror of life, and how much has it changed when it becomes a professional foul. Take it for the team.
Yes.
That's the new moral standard, isn't it? We set a very low bar. Perhaps we get the football we deserve. Finally, Sid, staying on the theme, as a game, is football getting better or worse?
Oh, well, it's very interesting. Guardiola's introduced this whole press into football, which I really enjoy, frankly. And since we're talking like this, I mean, I was very disappointed with the African final between Nigeria and Ivory Coast. It was a very poor game of football, frankly. Partly because the Ivory Coast players were falling over at the beginning of the game whenever they were tackled, and the referee was giving a foul, and it was just ridiculous. It was just mad, and it made a very poor game of football. But then I watched the game between Chelsea and Crystal Palace, and it was none of that was being applied at all. There was some quite rough tackles going in, and the referee was almost ignoring them. And we had an excellent game of football, frankly, and I really enjoyed watching it. So yeah, I think the Premier League is a very high standard, and it's very good football.
There we are. We finished on a positive note. So vote football, and of course Christian People's Alliance at the same time. Sid, we will see you next week.
Thank you.